So I think this is when we can ask more questions. Karen, would love to hear what questions people might have.
Yes, we have some very good questions for you here.
Awesome.
And thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Lots of information for us, and really sparked a lot of very, very thoughtful questions here from the listeners. So Paul is asking, auto-approving change requests for production environments seems counterproductive. How do you avoid production service impacts with no cab?
I think so. There's two chains of thoughts here. One is you know, the whole idea is you build this delivery pipeline where everything goes up to staging without any approval. Then you can have that sort of a manual approval process before that change goes into production, right? And someone could give that final thumbs up. But I think the idea is more about this practice that you need to be in a place where you can actually release to production all the time when you want to. Once you're thinking in that mindset, your teams work better. You work on building a better deployment pipeline. You also work on you also have a better culture where teams are working together because they're constantly releasing. So whether that you constantly are making changes to your production in automated fashion, that's not actually that relevant, but you should aspire to be in that situation where anytime you should be able to make a change to production environment. Clive, I don't know if you have something on that.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So one of the ways we have seen large enterprises manage agility, if you will, to manage the production velocity is version control, right? So the way they do that is it can, again, kind of goes back to, it can be a complete application portfolio versioning or a product-specific versioning. And the IT administrators can choose which versions based on whatever naming convention or policy they have are allowed to be in production. And then you can enforce those tags through a mechanism service catalog. And then you can use any of the many deployment mechanisms. It can be CI/CD, it can be a hub spoke model, and it kind of comes down to essentially, removing the gates for the right curated asset. And that's what we are seeing over and over happening with large enterprises. They put tags, they control the versioning, and then they deploy that. And that essentially gives them a kind of a set of series, if you will, which have to be checkmarked on the way to production.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Ken has a question, and Ken's question is, go faster is sometimes in conflict with maintenance windows and end of month or other blackout windows where changes are not allowed. Is it not just automation? Is it minimizing the impact of outage of a change? I'm sorry, minimizing the impact or outage of a change.
Can you repeat the question, Karen? Sorry.
Yes. So in quotes, when you were saying like go faster, right? Mm-hmm. In quotes, go faster is sometimes in conflict with maintenance windows and end of month or other blackout windows where changes are not allowed. Is it not just automation? Is it minimizing the impact or outage of a change?
Yeah, I can answer to that. So this, we have encountered some of these, and these are very relevant scenarios, if you will, in IT. But here is where a fundamental paradigm shift has to take place within IT, right? We're in the cloud. There literally is no maintenance downtime, if you will. If you enforce your policies correctly, and you have the new different or progressive thinking, as we call it, right? Whatever your downtime is, whatever your policy updates are, they can be all built in. So from an end consumer perspective, they will see no downtime. So this is where a shift has to happen. Think of it, and I'll give you an example. You're updating your website, or you're updating a particular back-end infrastructure. If you set the policies right, if you automate it through Service Catalog, or if you automate it through one of your CI/CD pipelines, in the back end, the updates will happen. You will just move from one instance to the other because it's all being managed in the cloud. These are not physical teardowns and tear-ups of servers, right? So there's a fundamental shift here which people have to embrace.
Yeah, and you have to treat infrastructure as code, where you're deploying, you're bringing up a new version of the infrastructure, and once that passes testing, you can switch over to that. And I feel like tools like leveraging tools like containers and Docker actually even takes it to one step further, because you're constantly building containers from scratch each time you deploy code. And now imagine patching your OS every time you deploy code, and that's powerful, right? If you do that once a year or once in blue moon, that process is very intimidating, and that's why you want to schedule maintenance windows and all that. But if you're doing that constantly, and that's what DevOps and continuous delivery kind of promotes, this is not eventful. This is something that you do all the time.
Okay, thank you. David had a comment on that discussion. He said, this discussion assumes that teams are deploying using DevOps strategy. Legacy will not work. Many are just deploying in a legacy fashion using cloud infrastructure. There's a comment.
Well, go ahead, JT.
Clark, go ahead. I know you guys have integrations with like ServiceNow and
Yeah, so let me give you an example of publicly referenceable. One of the largest mortgage companies in the world, I believe it goes by the name Fannie Mae, has integrated Service Catalog into ServiceNow, and they're using that essentially as an end-to-end IT implementation, orchestration, deployment into the cloud. And the way to think about it is they use ServiceNow's workflows, ServiceNow's approval process to decide and govern which organization, which sets of users have access to what products and what artifacts in the cloud. So from a front-end perspective, it's still the same single pane of glass, but from a back-end perspective, the same legacy on-prem / hybrid cloud, if you will, has integrated into AWS. So we are seeing many, in fact, I can give you the number, over 50% of the largest enterprises in the world going down this path. So that marriage is already consummated. Now we are seeing the effects come out on the cloud.
Thank you. David said thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, super quick, that's on BMC too. We are also seeing other large companies like Cherwell, Midmarket, and Jira wanting to integrate. So we can definitely have a deeper conversation on that. So I don't want to go sideways on this one.
Okay, and Todd came in and commented, and he said, LOL, that is what I call sprint to a waterfall. We do that here. We do development via Agile and Scrum, but deployment still in waterfall legacy methods. Just a comment from him.
That's good to hear.
Okay, yes, right. And then Rick wanted to know if we could just, again, what is the difference between what is the difference between old change management and modern change management?
So, in old environment, you can control, like, do you have this lengthy CAP process and things like that, where it just takes so long to get the changes approved, and then finally the resource get provisioned. You honestly cannot do that in cloud environment. You kind of have to embrace the change, that it's just going to happen. And there's actually a term called shadow IT, where there will be departments in the company which will just go create an AWS account and start provisioning resources because they're not gonna comply with how people are provisioning or doing things. So the traditional process is more bureaucratic and takes a long time to provision and get new resources. In modern change management process, you kind of have to assume that there's going to be a lot of changes, and there's going to be a lot more people who are going to be making changes, not just operation. You got to get used to the fact that developers going to be making a lot of changes to the infrastructure in addition to operation. So you have to embrace for that and use modern tools to implement the process around that. Hey,
can I give a flavor of the answer on what we are seeing from the customers here?
Sure.
So, and that's a great question. In fact, it's a clear and present, if you will, reality, what we're seeing in the industry. So yes, there is the legacy change, and yes, there's the modern change. However, what we are seeing is the bridge between them is what's essentially driving the innovation. So integration with the existing ITSM vendors, if you will, is still happening, and that's what's driving the change. And the biggest difference is the progressive organizations or the progressive ITSM admins or the progressive cloud centers of excellence who actually adopt this, they very quickly get it that it's no longer a matter of slowing down, but it's a matter of adopting this new cloud technology. And once you get past the learning curve, which, depending upon the organization's skill set, can be a bit steep, and we can help you there, it removes this friction very, very fast. And you can actually go to the cloud very rapidly.
Thank you, Clive. Clive, I understand that you've got a meeting that you need to attend.
Yeah, I can probably spend time. It's important, so I will. This.
A few more minutes? Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because a couple of them are AWS specific. So
Sure.
I just wanted to ask that question. Okay, and just while we've just taken a little break right here, because as soon as we finish with the Q&A, JT's going to give us a live demo. So we want to be sure to stay around for that. But for those of you that are going to need to drop off, I just wanted to remind you that the next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, May 17th, when the Axelos team is going to join us. And their presentation is titled The Future of ITIL and IT Service Management. And Axelos has announced plans to update the world's most widely adopted framework for service management in 2018. This session will summarize the update, ITIL's continued relevance as a proven and tested framework, what's happening this year, and about its future evolution. So you want to be sure to join us for that as well. Okay, so here's my other questions here. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Is it common to automatically synchronize AWS CMDB with the in-house CMDB, like in ServiceNow?
Is it common? Not as frequent as you see it, but is that the most common methodology we are seeing for ServiceNow customers? Yes, that's where it's going. Keep in mind, though, there's a nuance in here. One is the integration, and another is the replication. Now, from an AWS perspective, we don't have preference of one over the other. We always go with what is the best for the customer. But we always recommend that the customers always have control of their own data, right? And our recommendation always is, if you have a CMDB, always have it in your environment. And that can be, either an S3 or an RDS or whatever. But that gives the customer the ability to have a parachute out with the data. So what we are seeing customers as they integrate with ServiceNow, and there's no clear winner yet, is a combination of folks using the CMDB or ServiceNow, but then wanting to have the CMDB in their environment, not in ServiceNow's environment, because they want to be able to control the data and have access to it.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Remco, for that question. And Jerry's question is, can AWS Service Catalog be used for non-AWS-based services?
As long as it supports CloudFormation and there are some other infrastructure as code environments we support, the answer is yes. It becomes a little subjective and case by case, but the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. And Brian is asking, transitioning routing on-prem changes through CABs to deploy AWS changes without CAB is not as easy as throwing a cultural switch. Is there a tried and true interim step?
So this is where we start getting down the path of operations and integration. And again, and in fact, this is a great topic for a future webinar, and happy to discuss. But Brian is spot on. It's not a flip of the button, if you will, where the entire organization snaps into a new methodology. It is a learning curve, as I mentioned. There is also a fundamental retraining, if you will, where folks have to, embrace the new way of going to the cloud. So there is a learning tax involved. So you're right.
So maybe another webinar. I like that. And Cheryl was asking, how do you make sure full testing is complete and validation is completed before these changes go into production?
So there's more than one way to skin this cat, right? So it's again, this is where the organization's IT policies and ways of doing things come in. So some organizations will have a red-green deployment or blue-green deployment, if you will. And we have seen organizations version control everything they want to take live in a particular environment, and they will essentially take it through their regression testing, penetration testing, sandbox testing. You have a canary, you'll send a canary in to see everything is good to go. And when the production needs to go live, you flip the button on the versioning, and then your CI/CD pipeline kicks in, and then using something like a hub and spoke model, you can proliferate the entire stack sets down the downstream implementation. So these can be done in real time, if you will, right? You can do this is what we call a live migration or a hot swap. So these can happen. And again, this is a construct which is unique to the cloud. That's one way of doing it. Some organizations do a complete tear down and tear up. That's another way of doing it. So again, there is no one particular unique way or one particular prescriptive manner of doing it. We have what we call within AWS well-architected solutions, which we are happy to share as reference blueprints, which will give you, one or two ways of getting started. But the end goal is for the organizations to be able to go and customize it based on their needs. But we can definitely have a deeper conversation on that.
Yeah, I've even seen it where on each pull request in a version control, we'll spin up an environment, do testing. If all goes well, we'll tear down that environment. Then it goes through that pipeline where we might now push it to staging, right? So like Clive said, there's many ways to implement this. Every company has their own flavor and their own requirements, how they want to accomplish this.
Okay, thank you. And that is it for the questions. There's comments in here, great presentation. Thank you so much, very informative. And Matt says, this is right where we are now at our company discussing these issues and preparing to go into the cloud. So perfect timing for him. So I'd like to thank you both for all your time with that Q&A. And now we are ready for your demo, JT, whenever you're ready.